What do you think is the hardest question or the most difficult issue for an anarchist society to try and overcome?
What do you do about the kids? Because if you don't have a state and kids are basically under the dominion of their parents, how are you going to resolve cases, which there are no shortage of, when parents are bad actors toward their children? That is a tough one. And that's a tough one under any scenario. That's the thing. One of the big issues in terms of people attacking anarchism, which is, of course, is their prerogative, is they'll say, well, anarchism is bad because it's going to lead to war. I'm like, wait. The system you're advocating doesn't lead to war, so you can't have this kind of double standard. So this is a criticism. It's like, okay, you're not going to have child protective services possibly, or maybe you would in a private sense, like you have an apartment complex, and I don't know how they would resolve it. The point is, it's horrible now. Like the foster kid system, like many kids are, subject to abuse, and it's certainly less than ideal. So that's a good, tough question, and I do not have a good answer. But I don't think any system that's been posited has had a good answer.
And that's because typically there's an agent within an anarchist society that kind of opts in to some of the services, right, which then get used. But in a situation where the only legal agent is the bad actor themselves, and you have a dependent that
right,
requires somebody to step in, you have this vacuum which is not being filled by something.
Correct.
Yeah, that is a nasty situation.
Yeah, and it's just nasty in general.
I don't know, man. I mean, that's an ugly one. What about if a country went to war with another country? I know this is in the second half of one of the essays that I looked at.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it wouldn't be another country, it'd be like an anarchist area. But we already see examples of this in the past, which is this is hilarious, which is a criticism of anarchism that, like, if you get help from a state, it's not anarchism at all. It's like, well, if someone mails me food, that doesn't make them the government. They're just someone who's providing a service, right? So as of right now, like literally today, I, as a private company, can hire the U.S. government to provide security for me. This in no sense makes them my government any more than hiring a chauffeur is the one who's my chauffeur. They're the ones taking orders, not giving them. So there are many countries on earth already. The argument is, well, if the U.S. went anarchist, they'd be invaded tomorrow by China. Well, why isn't the U.S. invading Canada by this logic? Why isn't the Vatican being invaded by Italy, or Monaco by France? There's many examples of countries on earth right now that do not have any military whatsoever and can easily be overrun. So there are bigger governments, but no one is saying, or I'm certainly not saying, that for anarchism to be considered successful, it has to be worldwide. There's no reason why, if Ireland was anarchist for thousands of years and is used as an example historically of how an anarchist system would work. So if you had an invasion, we saw what happened with Kuwait. Let's pretend Kuwait, instead of a government, had been an anarchist area. You saw a lot of self-interested nations with big armies step in. And also, it's much harder to invade and conquer an area where everyone is armed and trained and using their weaponry. But I mean, look at Afghanistan, look at Vietnam. I mean, this argument, people say that, like, well, there's an anarchist area, like, they'd be conquered immediately. China's not having a fun time conquering Hong Kong. So the claim that this is something that's just done like with a snapping of fingers is nonsensical. It's very, very hard to invade and conquer, and at the very least, very expensive.
Can you see there being an anarchist state in your lifetime?
Well, no, because by definition, there wouldn't be an anarchist state. But anarchism is a relationship.
How should I? I keep on getting that wrong. How should I refer to it?
Sure, just you could call it anarchist area or anarchist society, but anarchism isn't a location, it's a relationship, right? So you and I have an anarchist relationship. Neither of us has an authority over the other. If there was a dispute, we would not be calling the state. Which state would we call? I mean, the possibility of this kind of international lawsuits is nonsensical. And even if you were here or I were there and we got drunk and someone got violent, we're still not calling the cops. So, and every country is in an anarchist relationship with one another. The example I use in the book is if a Canadian kills an American in Mexico, there's no one to call that's above them, right? The three nations have to have some system in place ahead of time to adjudicate this process. And as we said earlier, we can be certain that they have adjudicated this ahead of time In that it's not like when that happens, they're like, well, what do we do? Let's call Congress. The process is already in place ahead of time. So whenever someone is in the process of providing services, they're going to anticipate as much of these things as possible so that their consumers are satisfied with it. And we see this done in a very haphazard and ham-fisted way with governments right now.
Okay, and you can't see in your lifetime there being an area that turns...
Oh, I can. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's not going to be that hard either. It just has to be even just like there's many organizations right now that are trying to basically make things like this happen, like seasteading or other such situations. I think if people read between the lines, there has been in recent years, or as you would say, yes, a lot of hand-wringing over the increasing lack of legitimacy of the state and increasing distance between populations and their governments, and they're not feeling represented. And that's something that's healthy and, from my perspective, should be encouraged as much as possible. Although, of course, members of the corporate media think this is a nightmare and disaster because they go hand in hand with state power.
Where do you think would be the most likely anarchist area to rise up first?
Oh, I have no idea. In the same way that Marx had said there's no way that Russia's ever going to go communist, and that's where it ended up happening. Russia ended up going communist. That's where it ended up happening. So it could be just someone creates a new physical space, or someone creates some kind of micro city somewhere. I mean, this is the beauty of markets. You don't know. You can't predict how they will operate or where they'll pop up.
Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe. It makes me very happy. Peace.